Can I see the hands of anyone here who has not had Chris Fisher's cooking? Who's not eaten Chris Fisher's cooking? One. Okay, so then I won't bother with some of the cheap jokes I was going to make about it. It isn't true, by the way, that Chris cooked for us for 6 years. It felt like 6 years. It was only 5. No, but then the lure of the commercial got him, and he went to the beach plum and all the rest. Anyway, if you, how many people have seen the cookbook? So this is literally preaching to the choir. Well, it's quite a remarkable book. And when Chris told me that he was doing it, I laid odds on the likelihood that it would never happen. This is only because I know Chris really well. And when I saw it, it was startling to me because I'm something of a reader of cookbooks. I'm trying to overcome an upbringing where Swanson TV dinners were kind of the big night. And so I read cookbooks, and this one is different from any other that I've seen. It doesn't go first course, second course, salad course, dessert. Doesn't do that. It doesn't go beef, lamb, fish, shellfish, pasta. It doesn't do that. It's sort of a diary, and it's very much sort of a foodie diary about this place. And Chris and Gab are both of this town and of this island, and so it makes some sense that they would come together and do this. I thought what I'd like to do, though, instead of talking about the book, which most of you already own, I thought maybe we put them through their paces a little bit and talk about the food movement and what some of the terms that we're bombarded with are actually all about. So let me start. Are you enough of a foodie to handle some of these?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm a foodie, I guess.
Well, maybe you'll each answer this. These days, we hear about organic. We hear about sustainable. We hear about farm to table. We hear a bunch of these words which people have embraced. We hear about kale, which I always thought was a weed. What does it all mean?
I would say. Hello, is this on? I would say that the way that we eat currently in America is driven by the marketing of larger corporations, sadly, and so all of those words are used in a way to persuade or categorize people to make their food choices fit into some sort of mold or box. They're all very valuable words, and they all have a deep-rooted, amazing intention.
Well, let's take it one at a time. Tell me what organic means.
I mean, organic to me means dirty, of the earth, etc. Or natural. And what organic has come to be is again, all of these words are used to market food in a way that may have drifted from its original intention. They're all positive things. Organic is a certification that farms have if they follow certain practices. Yesterday, I was on a panel with the founder of Anson Mills, who pointed out that he is certified organic. He's been certified organic for, I believe, 35 years. And he said if he could take that certification back, he would, because of how it's changed. And so my response yesterday in regards to a similar question was, yes, organic's important. Yes, people should know what it means. And I can admit that I don't know the exact definition of organic. But the most important thing, because things become convoluted, is to just know your food source and do the homework if you can. And people take the word organic and run with it a little bit too much.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. Now, when you photograph food, can you see the difference?
No.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, if you take that a little bit further.
But I can see sort of the imperfections in the food that makes it more interesting and sort of more of an original shot than sort of a perfectly stylized, beautiful produce.
Well, and to answer that a little bit further.
So organic means deformed?
Yeah, that's what organic means.
Okay.
No, but Gab has been photographing the farm for a long time, and we like to joke about. I like to joke about some of the choices that we were making in the book. Initially, like one of our original book proposal drafts had a picture of a compost pile. And, most cookbooks have these beautiful finished plates, and you want mouth-watering things. And we've gotten flack about our choices in the book, actually. But we've gotten flack on Amazon, not that I read it, but somebody else reported
Me.
it to me. About the deer head hanging from a pole in the hunting section, which is one of the most beautiful pictures I've ever seen. It's just hard to say with all of Gab's beautiful pictures, but that's just that was there for about 6 years, the deer head on the end of a pole, and people don't want to see that. People aren't quite ready for that. I've been pushing the envelope with that for a long time, whether it be bloody hands or videos with animal slaughtering in them. It's a subject that I'm trying to push my agenda on, because how many people eat meat in here? How many people have killed their own meat? So, that's my point.
Now wait a minute.
Now we're on one, organic, sustainable.
What do we take? No, what do we take away from that?
What do we take away from
Encouraging
that
us
is
all
that
to slaughter our own animals.
Well, part of the point of writing the book was to tell the story of what it means to be raising food, living on an island that is surrounded by this bounty, and what it means to take part in your meals. And that was something that my family has lived for a very long time on Martha's Vineyard, that I lived growing up, and I wanted to share that story. But the point about slaughtering and raising animals is that we all have a disconnection between where our food comes from and how we purchase it and how we consume it. And chicken nuggets, which are, I don't know what chicken nuggets are. I think they're testicles, right?
Well, they're partially chicken.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a product that is not in any way natural in the world. And if you're going to take the life of an animal, which we all do, there's nothing wrong with knowing where that animal grew up, what its name was, what its favorite food was. I had a goat named Kale, actually. I'll use that as an example. My friends here, Emmeline and Eloise, they were good friends with Kale, and they used to come and milk Kale, and Kale was named Kale because she would only be milked if we gave her a bucket of kale. So she was a really smart goat, right? David hates kale.
I like goats. So the kale survived and the goat died.
So Kale, the goat, would only allow us to milk her if she had her head in a bucket of kale, and those guys would bring her muffins sometimes, which she didn't like as much, but that's okay. It wasn't your baking. It's just that kale is that good for you. And kale was also really annoying because for many reasons, and we ended up finally having a goat roast with her daughter Chard, and Gabriela photographed it, and that actually, in the disjointed storytelling way that I always tell stories, that's the beginning of our cookbook. And that answer right there sums up why the cookbook was so hard, because my brain does not work in linear ways.
Amen.
Eat kale.
But now, let's go to farm to table. What does that mean? And for those of us who don't live near farms, what does one do about that?
Well, farm to table is it's been an overused term for a style of, for a concept in cooking that has come to mean many things, but unfortunately it's been co-opted, much like other words trying to categorize food movements or systems. It's now become a style of cooking, and so my style of cooking has been called, he's a farm-to-table chef. And so to me, that, it means that you're getting your food directly from a farm, which is a fantastic thing, and it's one of the best things you can do is to give your money directly to a farmer. But it's also come to be an excuse for a lot of restaurants. It's become an excuse for certain supermarkets or it's become an easy way to categorize yourself or to attach yourself to a movement, but without actually a true definition. Actually, with all of the words that you used, farm to table, organic, sustainable, they've become very vague. And so, and at the same time, it went from a niche idea to a mainstream idea, and I struggle with the idea, with the if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If it becomes watered down, I mean, you could relate it to music, you could relate it to any company that grows, you could relate it to any idea that grows. When it's when it's small and finite and in its infancy, it's something very different than when it grows. So the farm to table movement is a positive thing, but you have to, just like as a consumer of food, you have to do your homework on what that actually means. If I'm a farm to table chef, I don't know what that means.
I'd say you're more table on farm.
Yeah, which is true.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, let's
Thank
talk
you.
about the recipes in the book. We'll get to the organization of the book
Okay.
sort of last, because I think that's the most personal of all of this. You've cooked all over the place. You've been in Italy. You've been in the Bay Area in San Francisco. You've been in New York City. You've been here a lot. Is there a name for the kind of cuisine that you prepare? It seems to me it's very driven by availability and raw materials.
Yeah,
And the
it's
freshness of, and the timeliness of that. But is there another name for it, for what you do?
I would say right now, hopefully, because I've been rooted here on the vineyard for the last few years, I would call it contemporary New England cooking, because what we're doing is so rooted in the ingredients here that if I'm cooking on Martha's Vineyard and I want to use the product here, I'm going to have influences from all over the place. And I spent part of the winter in Japan last year, and that we have shiso in our crostini, which we'll have afterwards. If you buy a book only, you can have a piece. So I would like to categorize myself as in the group of young people that are taking influences from various places and putting a twist on New England ingredients. I like to limit myself when I'm on Martha's Vineyard to, what I am finding in the woods or the farms or in the ocean, and so I guess that would be it. I cooked in Italian restaurants in Italy, and I also cooked California cuisine, and now I have a Japanese reference point, and so that's what modern cooking is in modern day life. Just as Gabriela has all of her references from her travels all over the world. And once again, I was so blessed to be able to work with her to bring everything to life that I was seeing so beautifully.
Now, you are blamed by Chris as being the inspiration for this. Your photograph started the ball rolling. Is that accurate?
Yes. I don't know if I would be the inspiration, but I would say the instigation that got the book started was about 7 years ago when I was back spending summers here hanging out with Chris and just following what he was doing because I thought it was interesting. And I had never shot any sort of food before that point, but he was doing really interesting food stuff, and I was just hanging out with him and taking pictures, and through that amassed a body of work, which the book is the final culmination.
And when you do that, when you take those pictures, I'm looking at carrots. Is that both orange and yellow? Yeah. Is that visual? Are you carrying the same kind of message that Chris is carrying? Or is it just what your eye sees?
A little of both. I think Chris has a aesthetic and a certain style. Neither of us are stylists, and as I said, I never work with food, but I think he sees something. The way that the way he cooks and the way he puts together meals is very aesthetic. So together, I think he would point out the interesting food or produce or dish, and I would shoot it. So it was a very collaborative aesthetic, I'd say.
Well, that goes back to the idea of having lots of reference points and taste and flavors. And Gabriela lived in Brazil and is half Brazilian. She has traveled all over the world. So she doesn't only shoot food. So she's shooting fashion and travel, and so she brings that perspective to the cookbook. just like in my cooking, I'm constantly, you can't, because if you have a Rolodex of flavors and tastes and combinations in your mind, uh, that steers everything that we're doing in there, and that goes back to her, my celebration of simple ingredients, because I was raised and born and raised and grown up across the street, eating very, very simple food, and that from a very early age made it easy for me to celebrate that.
But stay with that simple food theme for a minute. My experience with your cooking is that it's far from simple. It may start with straightforward ingredients, but you're not just a ham and eggs guy, are you? And if so, how did I miss that?
Excuse me? Yeah. Well, simple. I mean, the it, yeah. I mean, as far as simple goes, I mean, there's simple. The my approach to food is so holistic. From reading about the history of something and all the books that I read about food, which I do as much as I can, and from every reference point. And I was sorting my cookbooks this morning, to the act of getting to know farmers on Martha's Vineyard, farmers all over the world, and spending time with them, especially older farmers who have all this knowledge, and fishermen, and having oystermen at my house bringing us oysters and clams, and it's I'm so blessed with that. And then I get into the cooking side of things and spending time in kitchens with chefs and talking about techniques. So last year at the beach mom, I served a dish of bonito crudo, and we had the perfect bonito, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but bonito. It was so good, and I had spent so much time with bonito that we actually just sliced it and put it on the plate and put nothing else on it, no salt, no olive oil, no anything. And that is very simple, but to be able to be brave enough and to be able to think about how you could make that piece of food better, and the fact that I couldn't make it better, only my knife skills were the only thing that separated, me from another chef. That simplicity takes a lot of years of study and thoughtfulness to get to that place, and that goes into everything that I do, like the bread and the crostini that we served before this. There's 4 ingredients in that if you count the bread as an ingredient, and Olivia Pattison, who baked that bread, she has a starter for her sourdough, and she learned how to make sourdough starters in various places, but including Tartine in San Francisco, which is one of the best bakeries in the world, and that's like her child, and she feeds it a couple times a day, and she travels. She needs a babysitter for the starter, and it's like being a single mom, and so if you can know it, that idea of using really, really. And then the herbs that went on top, Sierra, that runs the farm stand, had harvested them for the farm stand, and I stole them from her, which she wasn't happy about. And those came directly from the field, and most people don't get to experience that. And so it's really simple sometimes, a meal I'll present, but it's been a really long process to get to that point. Just like with my conversation with Rick Mast earlier, it's like, a chocolate bar is a beautiful, simple thing that somebody's going to buy and consume, but the fact that he's buying his wrapper in Sweden and he sailed to the Dominican Republic to pick up the beans, and when you are a tormented person that wants things to be, you want to know more about things, you make it really complicated, and so that's the category I fall in. So.
Well, you're in chill, Mark, and it's August, so it's okay to talk about personal torment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from your point of view, what do you make of all this? And photographically, does it make any difference to you?
It's basically the inspiration for all my photography is just seeing Chris in action. I will say one of the more entertaining moments of our shooting was when we were going down to harvest some watercress. What was the trail? Where were
Fulling
we?
Mill Brook.
Fulling Mill Brook to harvest some watercress. And there was a stream, and Chris walked down into it to try to pluck the perfect leaves and realized that it was fresh water and decided it would be the opportune time to take a bath. and started disrobing and cleansing himself mid-shoot.
But that made it into the book, right?
I did,
Is that in
yes.
the book?
There is
What
a part of
page?
that.
There's better instances than that, probably. I mean, cooking dinners at night and cleaning fish at night and the bloody hands photographs.
Well, actually, I had never witnessed an animal slaughter before hanging out with Chris. And one summer he was doing multiple pig slaughters repeatedly. And so every time I would go and he would tell me he'd do it and I'd show up. And every time I watched him do it, it's fascinating. It's inspiring. It's very cathartic to watch almost. And I'm not religious or anything, but to see him take the life of the animal and then strip it and present it to be used later for cooking is really special. And I'm really glad that I witnessed that and that I was able to photograph that and share that with other people, which not many people get to see.
And it's a polarizing subject, and whether you're comfortable with it or not, that it's an evocative thing, and that's if somebody reacts positively or negatively, then you've evoked some sort of reaction from them.
I was say in my photo portfolio, I actually have a picture of Chris's bloody hands from one of these slaughters, and they're bright red. And when people are flipping through the book, they pause and they ask, "What's that?" And I could tell from certain people, I say, "Oh, that's just beets," or other people, you can be like, "Oh, that was from the pig slaughter."
But now that raises an interesting sort of anti-vivisection concern.
Excuse me,
If you were,
anti-vivisection?
I'll help you out. If you were talking to a vegan or someone who was a devoted vegetarian, and they told you that this was an appalling thing you were doing, what do you say?
I definitely respect their opinion, and being a vegan is one of the best things you can do for your body and for the planet environmentally, and so there's a million levels of respect for that choice. For me, I personally love pork and I love meat and I love lamb, and if I'm going to eat it, which I do, I like to make sure that it lived a good life and that it's honored both on the plate and in the process. So I say they're a better person than I am, and tip my cap if I had one on.
It would be a much shorter book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the organization of the book, I made the point earlier that it's a very atypical kind of an organization. I can't remember, for example, seeing a recipe in any book of pork shoulder followed by a recipe for blintzes. That's just not your average sequence. So what's the organizing principle of the book? Is it temporal? Is it experiential? Is it the seasons? Is it your mood? What's the organizing principle?
Well, the organizing principle was to chronicle a season, an entire year on the farm. And Kathy Young, my co-author, suggested we start in September because we all love September and we love the food so much. And it would be really obvious to start in July and August when the bounty is perceived to be here, but it's really the fall when it comes in. We also wanted to do a seasonal book, but we didn't want to be. The seasons are so ever-changing here, day to day, week to week, that we didn't want to do 4 seasons. So we actually broke it down into 6 sections and then 17 menus. And I wanted to do a book organized with menus because I wanted every level of cook to be able, anybody that was interested in food and in Martha's Vineyard or in our cooking or whatever drew them into this book, they could have different experiences with it. If somebody really liked a menu and thought it was beautiful and thought it was laid out perfectly, they could emulate that meal if they wanted. They could serve a multi-course meal and they knew exactly how to do everything. But they can also pick and choose. I wanted to appeal to basically anyone with that curiosity about how we do things, when we do it, what time of year. And so that's the long and short answer to that.
Okay.
You want to talk about Emma?
And we also had been making menus at the farm for many years. And Emma Young produced these letterpress menus that we wanted to honor at the start of every chapter. And so to be able to get 17 of those in the book was also a huge, huge victory for us. And so that was the other side of it, was between Gab's art, the writing that I did with Kathy, the recipes, and Emma's work, artwork. We kind of had the full spectrum of creativity. And we actually, I guess we were hard to work with because our book designer quit from Little Brown, and we ended up with Emma leading the way, designing the book as well, which we're very proud of.
Which is for sale which says book sales. Yeah. What do you do for next book?
Well, Kathy and I, as we were making crostini, we're cutting the bread and gabbing, and we are thinking about it. I can tell you some ideas. I mean, a few things. I have to credit my mom a lot for inspiring me to follow my creative passions, and so she had a student in second grade, Liz Packer, who was Liz Thompson and now maybe Liz Packer again, who runs SBS, and my mom was her second grade teacher, and Liz said to me, which always stuck with me, that my mom taught her how to color outside the lines. She was the first person to teach her that was okay, and so this book has colored outside the lines of traditional cookbooks, and I'm very proud of that. But the book is also there's a bit of like masculinity to it. There's a lot of the essays are about my father and my grandfather. And so we've talked about the idea of doing something with more of a feminine honoring for my grandmother, for my Aunt Marie, for all the people that influenced that. We've also talked about broadening our horizons in New England and exploring New England a bit more, and New England cooking. Surprisingly, when you write a cookbook, it's really hard to sell, and people aren't beating down your door when you're trying to sell your first one to publish a second one. So we have to sell this first one first. I'll sell you one at a deal.
What's that?
$35.
Tell me again. I owe you $35 or you owe me?
I'll give you $35 to buy it.
Great. I'm advised we have 10 minutes left. Are there any questions out there? Apart from when is dinner?
Yeah.
I have. Oh, yes, we're going to use them as Christmas gifts this year. Chris has offered us a deal. We can pay full list price for as many copies as we want.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
We can raise that.
Yeah. My question is that you've been a cook in so many different venues, restaurants, private chef, on the farm, pop-ups that you've done, all sorts of different ways. Tell me about what your favorites are and why, and what do you want to do in the future in terms of that?
Well, it's really nice to have a kitchen that is your home base, I found, especially after not having a home base. And as I get older, maybe I get a little more complacent, and it seems harder to set up. When we did our pop-up restaurant in New York City, I mean, that was one of the most stimulating things that we've done, from the naming of the restaurant, which had many funny island ideas for a while. And then, I mean, yeah, using the pop-up as an example, naming, marketing, building the
It
restaurant.
was called Fish and Rose.
It was called Fish and Rose, which was Lee DeRosier, my co-chef, and my name. DeRosier is French for rose, or of the rose, and we were going to call it the Quits a Queen, but then we thought that was a little queeny, and we were going to call it, I can't remember the other. I wanted to call it the Seagull, but then everything, nothing fit quite. There was no vineyard. That was a little too. We didn't want to beat people over the head too much with that. So much like your business, I mean, my favorite thing about food is taking consideration of every aspect of it, from what the person sees when they walk by the restaurant. And when you walked by Fish and Rose, it was a piece of cardboard that said Fish and Rose with a masking tape on it. And if you looked in, there was a fountain on the bar that I brought that was my grandfather's, that as I was packed up the U-Haul and was leaving Martha's Vineyard, filled with all of the products we were using and furniture, I saw this fountain in my yard, and we like squeezed it in, and that became the centerpiece of our pop-up. And then I'm just using the pop-up as an example of how I cook, but then we were located right on the edge of Chinatown, and so we had brought a lot of product in, and we were using Martha's Vineyard product, but then I would wander down into Chinatown, and I'd lived in New York City for a while, but I'd never shopped in Chinatown, and I started to get to know their food and their markets there, and that started influencing our cooking. And so no matter where I'm cooking, it's like a very holistic experience, and I found the Betsy Larson of Chinatown, who at first didn't want to sell to me, and I found them, again, because I'm perverse with my food choices, because I stood there on a December day and watched them process live frogs, and it was like the triplets of Belleville. You know that scene with the fireworks and the frogs smashing everywhere? They would, in one motion, cut the head off and then pull the skin off, and they would fling it against the wall, and then it would just go down. And they were wearing trash bags for insulation, and so I think that kind of sums up why Gab and I work together. Yeah. Anyway, he had great fish. So the other thing too, I've cooked. It's so special to cook. It's so special to be inspired by the people you're cooking for. It's so special to be inspired by the producers. It's special. Ned Allen and Kyla Binney getting married a few years ago and harvesting the wood for their wedding, raising all of the animals, processing them together, cooking them on apparatuses that they'd built. Those are the special moments. Cooking with my roommate, Luke, who's here today. Thank you for coming. And working together for a few years to get the soil right in his garden that was 3 years ago the woods, and bringing seaweed in. And granted, I don't do very much in that garden. It's 95% him, but then having a meal like a simple smoothie of spinach in the morning, or anything that he cooks, including sun gold tomatoes last night and spinach at the end of a long day, or cooking with kids. I don't know. It's all amazing, and being able to write a book and share those stories is kind of the culmination of that.
Any other questions?
So with all of those component parts of what's going through your mental portfolio, like 5 years from now, what is it that would make you feel fabulous because you had accomplished or were doing what?
Well, I'd
or
like
whatever
to.
time frame makes sense to you.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to cook a good meal tonight. That'd be a good start. I'd like to have an impact on people's ideas of food and how they source, how they feed their families, how they feed themselves, because the reality of cooking and being in a community and being a part of a community, if you're part of a rural community, which Chilmark is still rural, you can't help but be around the people that are growing the food and the fishermen and the people responsible for bringing that food to the market, to the farmer's market or the farm stands. So still having a positive impact on those decisions. And just like Beetlebung Farm is a small postage stamp in a large growing, large produce farming community, it's such a valuable thing to have food in your backyard or to take part in that process. And so if I can help inspire other people to do that in that model of reacting just like I react in my cooking to the circumstances, but reacting to what you can produce on your own fire escape or 5-acre plot or 2-acre plot or roof deck or old broken down car where you dry mint to make tea, as my cousin does, or foundation. You know, if you can figure out how to have a relationship with good, high quality food, then and if I can help in that process, then great. And I'd also like to continue to be, you know, innovating, as Rick said. So, and we tried that. I mean, with the book, I feel like we've pushed the boundaries a little bit with cookbooks in the sense that, you know, we have photographs in there that are not normal cookbook photographs. And also in the process, like I went to the, you know, we designed this as well on a antiquated letterpress, 19th century letterpress machine, Emma did, and then we translated that to a modern day book. At the same time, when we were working with the publishers and the editors, I was constantly asking them about ebooks and like how we can use multimedia methods to celebrate this book. Can we make videos of, you know, these recipes? Can we make videos of these stories? And so I ended up making the videos, and then after the fact, they said, you know, the technology's not quite there yet. So we're playing around with lots of different forms. There are videos out there that go very well with the book. There's one, we made a fantastic video about Ned and Kyla's wedding. There's an essay in the book about Johnny Hoy, who's an amazing oysterman. There's an 11-minute film that we made about him that was screened here at the Martha's Vineyard Film Festival and at a film festival in New York as well. Yeah, so I'm always like, I'm restless in how we can make things more interesting. And it's not always easy to work with and not always easy to house. As I was saying, Dave had to do a certain amount of training of me when I would come into the kitchen with dirt all over my feet and live animals and dead animals and every form of
But you did it
filth.
again this week.
That's true.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
very
much.
much.
And a reminder, even if